On August 18, 1944, at 14:47 hours, Lieutenant Royce Priest saw his squadron leader's P-51 Mustang burst into flames above Nazi-controlled France. Thick black smoke billowed from the engine as the damaged plane plummeted toward a wheat field just 20 metres beyond German positions. At only 21 years old, with just 2 months of combat experience, Priest was witnessing the idol he admired most about to end up as a POW. The enemy had concealed a flak battery within a rail car. As Major Bert Marshall guided his four-plane formation on a strafing pass near STN, the boxcar's side swung open, exposing 20mm and 40mm anti-aircraft cannons locked onto their path. The surprise attack hit the group from mere feet away. By that point in August 1944, the 8th Air Force was suffering heavy pilot losses over French skies. German flak units excelled at hiding their setups, camouflaging guns inside haystacks, barns, and even rail cars bearing Red Cross markings. US fighters on low-level strafing runs encountered deadly barrages from these concealed threats. The 355th Fighter Group had already lost 17 pilots over the prior 2 months. Some died on impact. Others managed rough landings in hostile areas and endured the war's remainder in Stalag Luft camps. A handful just disappeared, their outcomes unknown forever. Major Marshall wasn't even scheduled for that flight. As CO of the 354th Fighter Squadron, he could have handed off the task to subordinates, but he was known for personally taking the lead. He joined the unit in early June with barely 3 hours in the P-51, fresh from switching over from the P-40. His very second mission coincided with D-Day. That June 6th, he downed a German Ju-87 Stuka over Normandy's shores. 2 weeks on, he took out 2 Bf-109s. Come early August, his tally reached 5 kills, earning ace status faster than anyone else in the 355's records. His bold approach in the air sped up his rise through the ranks, pilot to flight leader in mere days, flight leader to ops officer in a fortnight, and ops officer to squadron commander in less than 2 months. Yet that very boldness now trapped him in a fiery cockpit over foes' land. Lieutenant Priest had followed Bert Marshall's career well before enlisting. Marshall had starred as a 3-time All-State quarterback in Texas high school ball and earned honorable mention All-American honors at Vanderbilt. When Priest learned they'd serve in the same squadron, it felt like the greatest stroke of luck in his service. He'd pored over Marshall's strategies, mimicked his techniques, and soaked up every lesson from the veteran flyer. Priest tracked the flaming Mustang's path as it sank from view. The P-51's Merlin engine had suffered a direct strike under the exhaust manifold. Another shell had torn into the radiator intake, spilling coolant into the rushing air. The plane had only moments left in the air, if that. Protocol was straightforward. If a flyer crashed behind lines, wingmen marked the spot, relayed details to rescue teams via radio, and headed home. Rescuing on site wasn't merely frowned upon, it was deemed unfeasible. The P-51 Mustang, a single-seat interceptor, offered no space for extras. No guidelines existed for touching down in enemy crops. No drills prepared for what Priest was gearing up to attempt. To find out the outcome of Priest's daring choice, smash that like button. It spreads these overlooked tales wider. Subscribe too, if you haven't. Returning to Priest, Marshall's blazing Mustang vanished behind the treetops. Priest shoved his stick ahead and dove toward the identical field. His radio buzzed with Marshall's command to break off. The leader urged him to pull back. Priest's fingers hovered over the radio toggle. He could confirm the directive and veer toward England. He could stick to rules and allow the Germans to claim Marshall. But his hand froze. The decision was set. The P-51 wasn't built for crop landings. Its liquid-cooled Packard Merlins hung low in the body, with the belly-mounted radiator scoop vulnerable below. Anything over 18 inches high risked shredding the cooling lines and wrecking the power plant. The gear, designed for runways, wasn't suited to yielding French soil. One bump or buried stone might buckle a leg and send the bird tumbling inverted. Priest brushed aside the dangers. He extended flaps to 40 degrees, slowed to 90 miles per hour, and aimed for the widest expanse of ripe wheat. During the flare, the Mustang's snout obscured straight-ahead sight. He gauged altitude by glancing sideways through the canopy, gauging proximity to the crop via the streak of stems flashing by his wing. The tyres smacked the ground firmly. The plane rebounded once, twice, before embedding in the yielding dirt. Wheat stems lashed the body as Priest hit the brakes hard. The Mustang decelerated with a jolt, trembled, and ground to a stop just 300 yards short of the tree line, where Marshall's fiery aircraft had vanished. Without delay, Priest pivoted the fighter to point back the way he'd arrived. If a rapid getaway was necessary, he couldn't risk losing precious seconds on a turnaround. The wheat field extended about 800 yards into the wind, hopefully sufficient distance. Overhead, the pair of surviving pilots from his formation orbited at 1,500 feet. They'd observed his touchdown in stunned silence. Now they scoured the nearby roads and hedges for any hint of enemy activity from the Germans. The reply arrived almost instantly. A military truck burst onto a dirt path a half-mile eastward, speeding straight for the field. The tarpaulin draped over its rear suggested it carried troops. From the truck's bulk, Priest guessed it held 20 to 30 men. The overhead Mustangs immediately banked into diving attacks, no second thoughts. Each boasted 6.50 caliber machine guns, capable of unleashing 14 rounds every second. The first pilot unleashed his barrage from 400 yards out, tracing bullets along the road and straight into the truck's hood. The vehicle veered wildly, erupted in flames, and tumbled into a roadside gully. The trailing Mustang raked the smouldering remains to guarantee no one escaped toward the field, but the looping pilot caught sight of fresh activity. Another truck was closing in from the north. To the south, a motorcycle with a sidecar emerged along a rural lane. Enemy units were closing in on the downed plane from every angle. Time was slipping away fast. Priest rose in his seat and scanned the tree line for Marshall. Plumes of smoke drifted up from the forest where the squadron leader had crashed. By now, Marshall would have torched his plane. All pilots packed thermite grenades expressly to reduce wrecked fighters to ash and keep advance gear out of foe hands. The Mustang's Merlin engine, its K-14 gun sight, its IFF transponder, everything had to go up in flames. 2 minutes ticked by. One of the circling Mustangs made a pass at the incoming motorcycle, sending its occupants fleeing into a nearby hedge. Priest mentally tallied his window of opportunity. The yielding soil had carved deep tracks behind his landing gear. Liftoff would demand maximum throttle across the entire stretch. Hauling an extra body into a one-seater would boost his stall speed and lengthen the rollout. The numbers didn't look good. He might not have runway to spare. 3 minutes elapsed. Marshall remained unseen. That second truck had halted a quarter-mile off. Priest watched troops bail out, fanning into a loose formation and pushing forward on foot through the crops. Suddenly, a shape broke from the trees. Major Burt Marshall dashed toward the Mustang. His jumpsuit stained black with grime, his features contorted in rage. He flailed his arms. Not a salute, but a vehement command. He was demanding Priest abandon him and go. Priest responded the only way that made sense. He hopped from the cockpit, released his parachute straps, and let the pack thud onto the wing. Next, he yanked off his emergency raft and flung it into the grain. No chute meant he'd be unable to eject if the motor quit en route. No raft spelled death by drowning over the channel. His action spoke volumes. He wasn't flying out of France minus his CO. Marshall halted his sprint. He paused 50 yards from the plane, eyes fixed on the gear strewn across the wing. German helmets now poked above the wheat as soldiers shoved through the growth. The Mustangs above had burned through most of their ammo on the vehicles. They had fuel for perhaps 1 or 2 more sweeps before going silent. Marshall bolted the last stretch to the aircraft. A P-51D Mustang's cockpit spanned 38 inches across and 42 inches from seat to canopy edge. It accommodated just one flyer in full kit: parachute, survival vest, seat cushion raft. Cramming in 2 adult males wasn't in the blueprint. Marshall stood 5 feet 11 inches and tipped the scales at around 170 pounds. Priest was a touch leaner, but still maxed out the gear specs. Combined, they'd cram into room for 1. Marshall scaled the wing first. He eased into the seat and wedged downward as far as he could, spine flush to the bulletproof backrest, feet stretched under the dash beside the yoke. Priest followed, perching on Marshall's knees with legs draped over his superiors. They packed in tight like stacked freight. The stick rose between Priest's thighs. His back dug into Marshall's torso. Their helmets nearly scraped the plexiglass top. Priest stretched to secure the canopy. It clicked shut with barely an inch above his headgear. In the cramped quarters, breathing came shallow. The August swelter under the dome-like enclosure was the air felt oppressive, drenching their flight suits in sweat right away. Priest's knees obstructed part of the instrument panel, yet he managed to monitor the critical indicators: fuel pressure, oil temperature, manifold pressure. Advancing the throttle, he sensed the Merlin engine revving up to maximum output. A thunderous 1,200 horsepower coursed through the structure. The propeller sliced into the atmosphere, hauling the overburdened Mustang ahead across the wheat expanse. Acceleration came sluggishly, far too sluggishly. The total load from both pilots, loaded ammo, and leftover fuel exceeded the plane's intended maximum weight by a wide margin. The yielding soil tugged at the landing gear. Wheat stems pounded the intake under the belly. Priest observed the speed building: 60 miles per hour, 70, 80. The distant tree line at the field's edge hurtled closer. Typically, a P-51 Mustang would leave the ground around 100 miles per hour. Accounting for the extra burden, Priest figured he'd require at least 115. His indicator read 95. With trees dominating the windshield, he eased back on the yoke and the gear lifted off. The plane lurched skyward, struggling to gain altitude as stall alarms blared loudly. The canopy tops whisked by mere inches below. Limbs grazed the underside. Finally, they broke free, ascending gradually above the rural French landscape. Wedged into a one-seater fighter, the pair had defied all odds to survive. In the rear, German troops rose from the grain and stared as the Mustang faded westward. Their target had slipped away, yet Priest and Marshall remained 200 miles shy of England. The plane carried perilous excess weight. The power plant overheated from the exertion, while ahead lurked German pursuits scanning for lone planes. The other 2 Mustangs from the group flanked Priest's machine as they rose to 8,000 feet. Their mission evolved from battle to protection detail. With ammo mostly spent, they couldn't challenge foes but could scan for dangers and steer the heavy craft towards safety. Priest evened out the flight and dialed back to cruising throttle. Since departure, the engine temp had risen without pause, demanding he chilled the Merlin to prevent seizure. During the takeoff run, the ventral scoop had sucked in wheat and grit, impeding airflow in the cooling setup. The gauge needle inched toward the danger zone minute by minute. The route to England spanned 180 miles of enemy-held France en route to the Channel shore. Anti-aircraft sites under German control lined the way. Bases for the Luftwaffe at Yverdru and Beauvais could launch fighters swiftly if observers detected US planes. Priest flew at a height evading radar, yet sufficient for a glide landing should power fail. Within the tight cockpit, the warmth grew intolerable. The glass enclosure trapped the August sunlight like a hothouse, sweat-soaked both thoroughly. Positioned under Priest, Marshall bore the complete downward force on his lower body. Blood flow halted quickly. Numbness started in his toes, spreading to shins and then upper legs. Even slight adjustment proved impossible. The cramped quarters immobilised them like captives in some ancient rack. Priest concentrated on piloting. The yoke shifted between his thighs with scant freedom. His arms pressed tight to his sides by the slim fuselage. Each adjustment demanded exact care. An abrupt shift might wedge the controls against Marshall's limbs, pitching the plane into a spin. The wingmen eyed the nose of Priest's Mustang with mounting worry. Coolant leaked from the cooler, streaking white in the wake. The Merlin was gradually boiling over. They projected 15 to 20 minutes until total breakdown if the heat kept building. Priest noted the issue via his dials. Choices were limited. Throttle down more to prolong the journey, but hazard arriving at the channel after dark, or hold pace and pray the motor endured till Allied lines. He opted for velocity, preferable to ditch in the channel amid rescue vessels than drop into occupied France amid waiting Germans. After 47 minutes airborne, the French shore came into view. The pale bluffs of the Cotentin Peninsula slid under them, secured by Allies' post-Normandy advance. Priest permitted a brief sigh of ease. They'd traversed hostile ground. Engine failure at this point meant touching down with comrades. The channel lay before them, 21 miles of chilly slate sea separating France from England. Priest had jettisoned his life raft back in the field. Marshall had left his behind with the wrecked plane. Should they splash down, neither would. They couldn't last more than a handful of minutes in that icy flow. As the plane reached the midpoint of the crossing, the engine's heat indicator hit the danger zone. Priest kept his eyes on the gauge's needle dancing at maximum, bracing for the ominous quiet that signalled the Merlin's defeat. Through the mist, England's shore came into view, those pale bluffs, verdant pastures, and the clear shape of the White Isle stretching eastward. With its power plant still humming, the Mustang cleared the English shoreline. Priest started his approach to Steeple Morton, the base for the 355th Fighter Group in Cambridge. The landing strip lay 60 miles distant. The engine heat kept rising. He'd pulled his leader from German clutches. Now he needed to rescue them both from the plane itself. 12 miles shy of Steeple Morton, the Mustang's power unit started stumbling. The reliable growl of the Merlin broke into a choppy rattle as hot cylinders gave out one by one. Priest boosted the fuel mix and hoped the motor would stay intact for just 5 more minutes. The base emerged from the hazy summer air. A pair of concrete strips crossed in an X over the Cambridge fields. Emergency rigs and medical units were already lining the primary path. The control tower had picked up alerts from the wingmen. All at Steeple Morton were aware a battered bird was heading in against all odds. Priest joined the circuit at 140 miles per hour, much quicker than usual. The heavy-loaded Mustang demanded that velocity to stay airborne. He lowered the gear, hearing the solid click as the tyres secured. Flaps extended in steps to 40 degrees. The plane lifted a bit before easing down. The tarmac sped toward them. Priest eased back on the stick, and the mains kissed the pavement. The rear settled. The Mustang taxied along the midline, slowing steadily while the motor hacked and wheezed, but kept going. He hit the brakes, halting the craft midway along the strip. Support teams dashed to the fighter before the prop came to rest. They anticipated a hurt flyer, maybe a fading soul who'd somehow coaxed his damaged ride back. Instead, they witnessed an astonishing sight no one had encountered. Like acrobats spilling from a tiny crate, 2 aviators extricated themselves from one cramped seat. Marshall was unable to stand. His limbs, pinned under Priest's bulk for almost 2 hours, had lost blood flow entirely, sending him crumpling when he attempted to step onto the wing. Crewmen hoisted him into a nearby ambulance. Priest dismounted on his own, drenched in perspiration from his suit, limbs trembling from fatigue and rush. Word raced through the 355th Fighter Group in moments. Flyers clustered by the plane to inspect the proof. Crop stems jutted from every gap in the fuselage. The intake vent brimmed with plants and junk. Grease trailed the engine cover from the scorching leak. The lead mechanic figured the Merlin was moments from locking up when Priest cut the power. The techs laboured 2 days to tidy the machine. They pulled grain remnants from the gear bays, rear wheel compartment, cooling slats and weapon slots. The cooler demanded total teardown to clear the jammed mess. A few fluid tubes got swapped. The motor required a thorough check and some reassembly. This bailout marked a first in 8th Air Force annals. Fellow airmen had tried comparable pickups for fallen Allies. Most met with tragedy, planes upending on rough terrain, smashing barriers, or getting shot up pre-liftoff. None had touched down a one-seater behind foe territory, squeezed in another rider, and made it back. Details of Priest's deed hit Group Command that night. By dawn, it had filtered to 8th Air Force brass. The tale posed a thorny issue for the top ranks. Lieutenant Priest had flouted a valid directive from his superior in battle on 2 occasions. He'd endangered a key asset and his neck in an unsanctioned extraction. Protocol demanded a court-martial, yet he'd preserved a top-tier squadron head in Europe. Major Burt Marshall boasted ace status with 5 verified victories. He was a battle-tested chief whose bold moves rallied his squad. Losing him to capture would have stung badly. The dilemma reached the office of Major General James Doolittle, head of the 8th Air Force. The very officer who'd spearheaded the storied 1942 Tokyo strike now weighed the future of a junior lieutenant whose feat blended valour with defiance. General James Doolittle had grappled with tough calls in the past. That April in 1942, he'd sent aloft 16 B-25 bombers launched from an aircraft carrier's deck, with the certainty that not a single one would make it back. Each aircraft either crashed, touched down in emergency spots, or was ditched once the fuel was depleted. 8 crew members fell into Japanese hands as prisoners. 3 faced execution. Doolittle had braced himself for a court-martial over the loss of all 16 planes. What he got instead was the Medal of Honor. Now he faced a strikingly similar dilemma. A junior pilot had staked everything on a mission without approval and pulled it off. The resemblance was troubling. Doolittle called for the complete debriefings from the 355th Fighter Group. He pored over radio logs, accounts from the accompanying pilots, and repair records detailing Priest's plane status. The facts left no room for doubt. Lieutenant Priest had got an explicit directive from Major Marshall to call off the extraction. He'd confirmed receipt of it, yet he'd disregarded it and set down regardless. Even when Marshall reiterated the command once on the ground, Priest brushed it off once more. The Uniform Code of Military Justice left no ambiguity. Defying a valid instruction during battle constituted grounds for court-martial. Penalties spanned from demotion to jail time. In the gravest scenarios, it could lead to death. Such rules served vital purposes. Armed forces relied on strict hierarchies. If each flyer acted solely on their own instincts, unified efforts would collapse. Still, Doolittle grasped nuances that no rulebook could convey. The 8th Air Force was hemorrhaging aviators quicker than new ones could be prepared. Each veteran who endured one more sortie boosted survival chances for his peers. Marshall wasn't just another flyer. He led a squadron, held ace status, and pioneered tactics that shaped the whole group with his bold approach. Losing him would shatter spirits throughout the outfit. One more angle weighed in. The conflict was hitting a pivotal stage. Allies had burst free from Normandy and surged through France. The Luftwaffe was fading, but remained a threat. US pilots had to trust that fellow airmen wouldn't leave them stranded if shot down. Priest's bold save proved a potent point. It revealed how flyer camaraderie could override directives, protocols, and individual peril. For 3 days, Doolittle mulled these elements. He bounced ideas off his team. He scoured past cases for parallels. Nothing fit precisely. Fellow airmen had tried extractions in foe territory before. Everyone flopped. Some doubled the captives, others wrecked planes and cost lives. Priest stood alone in his triumph. The general settled on his call. No court-martial for Lieutenant Priest. Rather, he'd nominate him for the Medal of Honor, America's top bravery accolade. The nod would highlight the rescue's daring and its trailblazing success. Yet Doolittle tacked on a condition. He worried about the signal a Medal of Honor could broadcast. If more airmen chased such stunts and botched them, the toll in personnel and machines would mount. The 8th Air Force couldn't indulge rogue bravery. Any pilot dropping into enemy turf for a pickup risked not only himself, but his team's assets. Doolittle adjusted his proposal. Swapping the Medal of Honor, he suggested the Distinguished Service Cross, the country's runner-up Valor Honor. The write-up would laud Priest's guts and prowess, while subtly noting that his feat, for all its win, ought not to inspire imitation. The documents progressed up the line. 8th Air Force HQ greenlit it and sent it to Washington. A presentation was set for late September at Steeple Morden. Lieutenant Priest would get his award straight from General Doolittle. The general intended to pair the medal with a pointed talk. He aimed for Priest to grasp precisely why the top honour stayed out of reach. The event unfolded on September 21, 1944, at Steeple Morden. Flyers from the 355th Fighter Group's 3 squadrons gathered along the runway. Support staff halted tasks to observe. The group leader flanked General Doolittle as Lieutenant Priest strode up for the Distinguished Service Cross. Doolittle affixed the medal to Priest's uniform. The ribbon, blue accented with red and white, draped beneath the silver cross. It mirrored the very award Doolittle had earned for the Tokyo strike, later elevated to the Medal of Honor. Those watching caught the import immediately. After securing the pin, the general clasped Priest's hand briefly. He met the young lieutenant's gaze and shared the prepared words. He had never thought to enact a rule barring pilots from touching down behind adversary positions to save fellow airmen appeared utterly audacious and practically unfeasible, something no sensible individual would even consider. Yet Priest shattered that notion entirely. His feat stood out as both the boldest and most imprudent deed that Doolittle had seen over his 2-year tenure leading the 8th Air Force. The awarded medal honoured that courage, while the choice to deny him the Medal of Honor highlighted the recklessness. Without complaint, Priest received the accolade. He had braced himself for a court-martial rather than any praise. The Distinguished Service Cross exceeded his wildest expectations. Years afterward, in correspondence to Burt Marshall's son, he confessed that the ambiguity surrounding his outcome had proven the most agonizing aspect of the ordeal. The actual flight had filled him with dread, but the subsequent limbo proved even more harrowing. This operation became etched in 8th Air Force folklore as the inaugural effective piggyback retrieval using a P-51 Mustang. It certainly wouldn't mark the end. Priest's bold move motivated fellow aviators to pursue comparable extractions in the ensuing months. Just 10 days later, on August 28th, yet another pilot from the 355th Fighter Group touched down in Nazi-held France to retrieve a crashed companion. His plane got bogged down in the muck. The pair dodged enemy grasp and made their way back to friendly territory by trekking on foot. Then, on October 3rd, a pair of rescue operations unfolded simultaneously. In one, a flyer managed to lift his wingman aboard a single-seat aircraft. The second effort saw the rescuer trapped in yielding terrain. He and the man he sought to save fell into German hands. The risks of such ventures were starting to crystallize. Certain missions triumphed, while others amplified the toll. On November 18, 1944, the 20th Fighter Group notched a piggyback success when First Lieutenant Jack Ilfrey set his P-51 down in a meadow and pulled his wingman to safety amid hostile gunfire. The 4th Fighter Group joined the list on March 18, 1945, as one aviator saved Captain William McKinnon from inside German-occupied territory. As hostilities concluded, the 8th Air Force had logged no fewer than 5 thriving single-seat fighter rescues. countless other bids collapsed, leading to extra deaths and wrecked planes. Though never formally approved, the method stayed off the books. No official rule either greenlit or banned it. Leaders just averted their gaze whenever airmen opted to stake it all for a buddy. Major Burt Marshall resumed frontline duties mere days post-rescue. He regained complete use of his legs after the blood flow issue. Throughout the autumn of 1944, he kept guiding the 354th Fighter Squadron, boosting his kill tally and securing a Silver Star for his command prowess. By October, he'd risen to Lieutenant Colonel and taken on the role of Deputy Commander for the 355th Fighter Group. When a later squadron effort ended with 2 flyers taken prisoner, Marshall grappled with the legacy Priest's Act had set. The European conflict wrapped up on May 8, 1945. Marshall endured. Priest endured. The plane that ferried them to security got fixed up and redeployed, logging more sorties right up to Germany's capitulation. Still, the tale of that sweltering August day in a French grain field was far from over. It shadowed both for the remainder of their days. Colonel Royce Priest left the United States Air Force in 1968, capping off 28 years on active duty. His path wound from French farmlands to Andean peaks in South America. For 3 years he piloted for Chile's president, where he wed Anita. He instructed combat pilots for partner countries. He commanded jets that the Mustang-flying subaltern of old would have dismissed as fantasy. The Distinguished Service Cross stayed his greatest treasure. He seldom broached the rescue unprompted. On those occasions he did. He shifted credit to the strafing escorts who granted him precious moments, and to the mechanics who pieced his battered bird back together. He viewed himself as lucky, not valiant. Lieutenant Colonel Burt Marshall closed out the war overseeing the 355th Fighter Group. His scoreboard showed 7 verified dogfight wins. The Silver Star saluted his stewardship of the 354th Fighter Squadron amid the fiercest skies over Europe. Post-war, he pressed on in the Air Force, later heading fighter units in occupied Japan. His prep quarterback exploits, 3-time All-State in Texas high school ball, earned a spot in the Texas Sports Hall of Fame come 1971. The duo's camaraderie lasted till the end. It solidified in a cramped cockpit meant for one, soaring above foe lands with a faltering motor and absent chutes. Bonds like that endure forever. In December 2002, Colonel Priest penned a note to Bill Marshall, son of Burt. The letter Comte Priest delivered the most comprehensive record of the rescue mission to date. He recounted the concealed anti-aircraft gun, the fiery Mustang, the frantic touchdown, and the harrowing journey back. He shared the terror he experienced while awaiting word on whether he'd face a court-martial. He captured the instant when General Doolittle affixed the Distinguished Service Cross to his uniform. Above all, he explained his motivations. Burt Marshall had been his idol well before the conflict began. Joining his squadron seemed predestined. When Marshall's plane burst into flames above France, Priest didn't crunch the risks or consider the rules. He just couldn't allow his idol to perish in a Nazi POW camp. Colonel Royce Priest died on May 18, 2004, in Riverside, California, at the age of 81. His obituary noted him as one of the last surviving World War II fighter aces and holder of the country's second highest honour for bravery. It highlighted his time in Chile, his extensive Air Force tenure, and his deep commitment to his spouse and loved ones. Nowhere did it reference the time he crammed 2 men into a single-seat fighter and navigated them back through hostile skies. Certain tales are simply too remarkable for a standard notice. The P-51 Mustang that ferried Priest and Marshall to security wasn't set aside as a monument. It completed its wartime duties, probably got auctioned off as excess gear, and faded into obscurity alongside countless other aircraft from the era. No exhibit features a sign marking the inaugural tandem evacuation in 8th Air Force annals. Yet the tale endured. It spread among aviators, from old soldiers to scholars, from parents to their kids. Bill Marshall penned 2 volumes on his dad's outfit, each featuring descriptions of the operation that spared his father's life. If this narrative touched you like it did us, please do this one thing: smash that like button. Each thumbs up encourages YouTube to share this with a wider audience. Subscribe and enable alerts. We pull overlooked tales from forgotten records daily. Accounts of aviators who staked it all for their brothers in arms. Genuine folks, authentic courage. Leave a comment below and share your viewing spot. Are you tuning in from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our audience spans the globe. You're more than an observer. You're aiding in preserving these legacies. Share your spot. Mention if a relative served. Just confirm you're with us. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for ensuring Royce Priest and Burt Marshall don't fade into oblivion. These heroes merit remembrance, and you're contributing to that.